Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Taylor, and you are listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast, your weekly digest of hobby goodness. It's been a long time coming, but finally I get to interview someone with the same hairline as me. And no, I don't mean Donny Caltrider, who returns again this week to co-host this jalopy. I had to look up how to spell that word. It's a very American word.
Jalopy, is it?
Jalopy.
With a
It
J,
is.
right?
Yeah, it's a J, but it's the bit afterwards. You don't know where it's going to go. Is it Jell or JAL? It's JAL for those who are wondering. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be able to welcome this week's guest, someone who may well need no introduction by now to our listeners, but he's getting one anyway. So strap yourselves in. Well known for his beautiful fantasy and sci-fi themed paintings, his work spans a variety of genres, including novels, comics, and film. I lifted that from somewhere, by the way. I didn't make that up. According to Wikipedia, so this is where he's going to correct me if he's wrong. If it's wrong, he's been nominated for 7 Hugo Awards.
Sounds maybe about right.
Sounds maybe about right. Good. You can go in and edit it if you need to. And has won a Chesley. Is it a Chesley Award?
Chesley, yep.
Chesley, there we go. That's spelled incorrectly on Wikipedia. And a Jack Gorn Award for Best Emerging Artist in 2007. He's worked on Magic the Gathering, as Donny knows, and is founder of the Muddy Colours website, which I love, by the way, since I discovered that. A collective of more than 20 artists dedicated to providing a free online resource for aspiring and professional artists alike. His work has appeared on hundreds of book covers, and I, for one, will remember the date of 21st of June 2023 as the date that will live in infamy, as it's the day I discovered the work of artist Dan dos Santos. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, Donny. Good to see you both.
Hi, Dan.
Everyone gets one of those, and sometimes they get ridiculously long, sometimes they get very creative, sometimes they're really short. So, anyway. Dan, how many of these have you done now on your press junket?
Oh, not too many. This might be number 4. I think I did one with Upper Deck with Billy, and then just Spidey hits, and then I popped in on one with a group of guys.
Marvel Roundtable.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
We're pretty early in the queue.
Did they know you were going to pop in, or did you just appear and go surprise?
No, I just snoop. I hang out. I've been hanging out in these groups for years, I just totally snoop and make weird comments, and that's it. And so I saw they were having the round table, and some questions came up, and I just ended up popping in.
That's hilarious. Excuse me, sorry, I'm about to cough. Let me just mute one sec. Oh dear. I need more whiskey. So Dan, where do I start? So what I wanted to do was, obviously you've probably been asked quite a lot of questions by now about stuff. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a kind of origin story-esque first bit of this interview.
Sure.
Can you tell me your earliest memory of seeing Marvel or fantasy sci-fi art?
I guess it depends on what you call fantasy, but I'd say probably my love of fantasy art began with 80s cartoons. He-Man, Thundercats, Voltron, Transformers, all of those things were pivotal to me and kind of launched. I think I was just about 5 or 6 years old. Most of those cartoons, I think people don't realize this, that a lot of those 80s cartoons, I actually want to list them because there's so many, but the ones I just mentioned, Thundercats, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, Transformers, GoBots, Dungeons and Dragons, so many others, all launched within 18 months of one another in 1983, between 1983 and 84. So it just changed TV for me. It changed everything. It changed my toys, changed my everything. And that's when I started just drawing dragons and robots and people fighting.
Oh, wow.
So that was probably my earliest start. And from there, I already had this passion for drawing those things that I was already seeing on TV. And then I discovered comics, probably really got into them when I was probably 12 years old or so. And that's right when Rob Liefeld New Mutants was hitting, and like you kind of
Oh,
got this
wow.
90s surge happening that really I think changed the face of comics.
So you're properly a 90s kid then, if you were coming up around that sort of time, then I guess.
I guess I was born in the 70s, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. So was I. I think I've got a few years on you though. But no, I remember in on the cartoons front. Did you guys get there was some, I think there were more kind of Japanese from Battle of the Planets, I
Mhm.
remember,
Yeah.
and Ulysses 31.
Did not get that or Silverhawks where I lived. I had New York, Boston TV and only sort of
Mm,
made it there, but there were a lot I missed out on.
there were so many. And they all had comic spin-offs as well,
Yep.
pretty much as well. So do you remember your what kind of, so you mentioned Rob Liefeld and New Mutants. Was that the thing you went in on? Was it X-Men?
Yeah, like X-Men was big for me. I think a lot, it was mostly artists I followed more than anything else. The X-Men always appealed to me just because they're characters. I don't know why. Maybe just more creative, more colorful and stuff. But as I started getting into the art, it was really Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, and Todd McFarlane. So like the
Oh,
only reason I read Spider-Man was because Todd McFarlane, and
mm,
I just kind of followed those artists in anything they did, and that was kind of my like epitome of like this is how good art can get. And I was aspiring to be as realistic as those guys because it looked more realistic than the cartoons I had been watching. And it wasn't until like the Just Go 92 set dropped that then I was like, oh, this is the next step. This is like that, but even more realistic. This is what I want to do.
wow, wow. So so you obviously, I'm guessing you were collecting comics at the time
Yeah, I
as much as you could
very
afford, I
I don't
guess.
know if you'd call it a like collecting, but it's what I spent my money. I was
Yeah.
I was I was not wealthy as a child. My allowance was enough that I could buy maybe one comic every 2 weeks or something. So I was pretty selective about what I
Mm.
was buying. And yeah, and they were my Bible for the week. That I would buy, X-Men #1, and I redrew that thing from cover to cover. Like, and I did not take
Wow.
very good care of my comics for what it's worth because they were utilitarian. They're like lying around. I'm drawing and
Yeah,
copying them, and like, so yeah.
yeah. I bet. I bet. So did you were you obviously the Just Go set coming out in 92, were you did you then, that minimal allowance, did that then go onto the cards? Did you leave the comics behind, or did you try and afford both?
Cards, and in retrospect, I had bought very few. I think I just had really generous friends that were giving me all their doubles and stuff like that, and that's really kind of what kept me sated.
Mm,
And I still think that's a really nice thing that this community does. That you were mentioning that this is about collecting. Like it's not
yeah,
just um, the hunt for something is part of the fun, and all of this and the sharing with other people and trading and swapping. That's like the real joy of this, I think. And so
yeah.
yeah, I had some great friends that would give me cards, and I would give them whatever else I could or draw pictures in lieu of that, and give them drawings in exchange for cards. So
Oh
That's
wow, that's
awesome.
cool.
The earliest art trades. That's good
yeah.
stuff.
I'm wondering if any of those youngsters that you were, I don't know if you're still in touch with any of them, still have an
I
early
wonder
Dan
if we
DeSantis.
might. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It was a long time ago.
yeah. Or they might be thinking, oh, that's worth money. You know, that someone always says, oh, you keep that, that'll be worth money one day. And they're probably like,
Worth money. Unless you're Joe. Joe's high school drawings are like up for auction and they look fantastic. I was
But
not very good in high school.
oh. But that's the thing. With Joe, I mean, he told us this. I mean, some of the stuff he was doing at 15, 16, 17 was
Yeah.
just like,
But that's the
wow,
benefit of going to it's an art high school he went to. I mean, he was focused on that from the time he was, 15
okay,
years old. So,
wow, wow. Well, that's the. I remember when we spoke to Greg Hildebrand, he showed us a piece that he did when he was 12, and it was just like, what? You're
yeah.
12? So I guess
Yeah.
it's in the
It's a lot
blood.
of, when you look back at old illustrators, and I'm talking golden age illustrators, Leyendecker and Rockwell, all those guys were pros by the time they were 16. I think it's just
Mm,
this mentality, like you had to, by the time you graduated high school, it was like time to get married and get a job. So it's like there was no messing around, I think, for a lot of that older
yeah.
generation of artists.
Yeah, yeah. I need to be able to earn some money, sell some pieces. So when you I imagine you did when you went through kind of your school, your high school. Were you kind of focused on art then, and then it led to kind of higher education, going to art school, and
Yeah.
that?
I had always thought I would be an artist, and I thought maybe I was serious about it when I was a kid, but it's not until you really get serious about it that you're like, oh yeah, I wasn't that serious about it back then. It was still always my singular focus. I just didn't work as hard on it as I do now. And then in high school, I was really fortunate. I landed an internship with an artist named Stephen Stroud in my hometown, who was just a consummate illustrator. I didn't know his work, even though he was he did all the first edition Stephen King novel covers and stuff. So
Oh,
just like a professional. And he was the president of the Society of Illustrators, which is an organization in New York at the time. And I just, dumb luck, happened to live close to him. And I wasn't very well read as a kid, so I didn't know his work from book covers, but I showed him the stuff I like to draw, which was mostly comic book stuff. And he was like, what you want to do is called illustration, fantasy illustration. And so I
wow.
started researching Michael Whalen and all those guys and really discovering what I wanted. And he kind of set me on this path. He was like, you need to go to school. You want to learn to oil paint. You want to do this and this and this. And he just became like, it was supposed to be a 1 day a week thing in his studio. And I never left for like 2 decades.
Oh
So
my, wow.
he just adopted me basically. And so he didn't coerce, he convinced me I should go to school. So I applied to the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan and went there for 4 years. And I had kind of been the best artist in my high school. And so I only really like strived as hard as I needed to be that best. And then you go to an art college and you realize, oh, everybody
It's
was the
not
best
there.
in their high
Yeah,
school, and I
yeah.
need to really step it up if I'm going to do it. And it kind of just like kicked me in my pants a little and got me really like, it's still been my singular focus since then. And I had
Wow.
an amazing class, by the way, when I was at SVA. So the competition was so stiff, like it was great.
Yeah. Wow. I love the idea that, you just have to just keeping up improves you. I always find that interesting when actors are talking about being in a scene with another actor, and it's just like, it's all I could do was to keep up with the guy, and just learning from just doing that 3 5 minute scene.
And I
Um,
love that. And I'm not a lazy person, by the way. Like when I say I didn't work hard enough, it was probably a more healthy work-life balance that I was achieving. But like, I'd rather be the worst guy in a group of great people and aspire to that than be the best guy in a group of, oh man, people.
mm,
And so really like I feed on that. When I see people succeeding and growing and I can watch them grow from week to week, that excites me.
that's interesting. That's interesting. Would you? I found this interesting when I was doing some uh, research about you earlier on. Um, you describe yourself as an illustrator as opposed to an artist. So I probably know the answer to this, but where do you see the difference in the two?
Oh, I mean, it's all semantics, honestly, but
Yeah.
I have some things in my head that I think kind of shift where those gray areas lie. To me, like art serves multiple things. There's form and function, right? So like even a table can be a piece of art. I think if the function outweighs the form, you're probably talking craft, like woodworking and stuff like that. Still artistic, but it's not art so much as craft. When the form outweighs the function, I'd consider it art. And I think illustrators specifically doing it commercially and I'm doing it for other people, I think, and I'm telling stories, that makes me an illustrator. Whereas an artist might be somebody who just paints for a gallery and is painting just for them.
Mm.
Uh, I really very rarely paint for myself. So
Gotcha. No, I just found it fascinating. I mean, it makes sense to me. Um,
I
that
think
that
of
would be the
illustrators
distinction.
as blue collar artists is an
Yeah,
illustrator.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, so before, just just curious to know how you came to the point where you're kind of between getting the call from Upper Deck and leaving that school in Manhattan. Did you do any professional Marvel work in that period on
No,
Marvel
no, I
stuff?
have never worked for Marvel. I've worked for nearly every other comic company there is, which is funny because I've always been a Marvel kid growing up, but they never reached out to me. And I just kind of like, I know their budget isn't, publishing is very good to me. Publishing treats their artists much better than comics do, to be honest. And a lot of that is just grandfathered in from like the heyday of having people like Line Decker and stuff. So when you do publishing, you're getting paid 5 times the rate for a cover. You get to retain the rights to your images. So for 20 years, I know my name's probably new to a lot of people collecting Marvel cards, but in book cover illustration stuff, I'm fairly well known. I must have at least 24 #1 New York Times bestsellers to my credit now. But that doesn't get the same notoriety. People don't buy books for the book cover art on it the same way card collectors and comic guys buy comics for the artists. So it's easier to stay under the radar when you're doing commercial work like that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And book covers kind of spread out. I've always pursued comics a little bit because it's been a passion of mine. So I've done a lot of stuff for Dark Horse, a lot of stuff for DC Vertigo. And it just kind of like, I always wanted to pursue Marvel, and I kind of specifically really wanted this job in particular, and somehow it just fell in my lap one day without
Wow,
much.
okay.
So
All right.
I can't complain.
So Donny will know about this. Donny, so when did you first kind of hear of Dan from because you're Magic the Gathering through and through. If I cut you in half, you'll bleed Magic the Gathering. Not that I want to cut you in half, but you know what I mean.
So I knew Dan's work from when I was, I guess, probably in like high school, early college, from like Alara, Lorwyn, Shadowmoor, like some of your earlier Magic stuff. And then you kind of just like didn't do any more Wizard stuff for a while. And then right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a huge set that came out. And that's when you had Sword of Fire and Ice and then Stoneforge Mystic, which is still one of my favorite Magic illustrations ever. But Dan was back, and then he disappeared again. So it was like we have a big early body of work, and then a couple pieces that were in like early. When was that? I think that was like late 2020. They came out. They probably painted them maybe a year before, and then that was it. And then there was no more. So it was like this big re-entrance, and then nothing. And now we know why, obviously, but it was
the nothing. Yep. Yeah.
And the lack of Magic cards wasn't for lack of interest or passion. I love Magic. That was the other thing I collected, and I used to play Magic as far back as like beta set. And Magic was a client I actually specifically pursued because I wanted to do their cards. The trouble was just scheduling. That Magic works on like kind of these 2-month blocks. They'll tell you like, here's your concept, and then we need sketches and finish at these dates. And publishing works in more like seasonal blocks. So I was getting booked for book covers 3 months in advance, and I would fill up my 3 months, and then I'd get called from Magic. I'd be like, you have time this month? I'd be like, I don't. And that just went on and on. And so it wasn't until like those other cards, I had contact, I think that was Tom Genkop, the art director. And he told me things were coming up. So I set aside time speculatively, not knowing what they were going to be 6 months in advance, so I could specifically do those jobs for him.
That's great. Yeah, I think that was him. He was the early art director on the Booster Fun and the showcase treatments, like what would have been in Double Masters. But I know their wave, like the way they do the waves, can be really, really good for some folks, and then it can be a nightmare for other folks, depending on what other commercial work you're doing, whether it aligns or not.
Yeah, and so much of it comes down to just logistics of scheduling and how fast I can paint. Like I can't do more than 2 or 3 Magic cards in a wave. I'm just not that fast. You'll see other guys like Greg Staples or something do 10, no problem. So
wow. I have to say, most of the last 3 minutes just went over my head because I know nothing. I know nothing about the fact that it exists, and a lot of people are really into it, and it's got some really good artwork in it. And everything else, I rely on Donny to tell me, and I find myself just nodding at Donny while he's telling me and going.
It's been an interesting mix since Dave did 2020, because when he did the set, there was a big influx of people
Yeah.
that came from Magic, both on the original art side and the collecting side, because Magic doesn't really have anything like masterpieces. It was before serialized cards and really before showcase treatments and things like that. So it was an avenue that I know myself and a lot of other people were looking for, in something that most of us are interested in already. They kind of go hand in hand. So it's
They do.
it was a nice thing for me to have something to really like truly collect and chase and trade, like the way we used to trade Magic cards, because Magic's changed over the years in the way that people collect and play, and Marvel kind of scratched that itch for a lot of people, those couple of years ago.
That
Yeah,
was,
and I think there is a lot of overlap. The demographic, I think it's a lot of the same people collecting both. And I think this is it with comics too. I think a lot of the people that are buying comics now are the same people that were buying them in the 90s. We've just grown up. And it's like people who were playing Magic in the 90s are just now old enough to be buying original art, and they're swapping originals the way they would have done cards. I suspect it's the same with Marvel communities.
It is, yeah. I mean, I always said, like, when I would, when I collect Magic originals and now Marvel originals, it's a way that I can interact with those things without having necessarily like the time investment to go to a comic shop or a trading card shop, every weeknight, just because I have other commitments. So the artwork is that gateway to let me interact with artists and people and do those kind of things just on a different scale.
Yeah.
it is. What I found interesting, because Donny, Masterpieces 2020, that's kind of where we met, because you came into the group, and then we started talking, even though we've never actually met, because I'm 3,500 miles away. But it was very interesting when that happened, because you did, when you've got a body of collectors here and a body of collectors here, and the Marvel collectors are very much a certain way, certainly the older school ones, and I think the Magic ones are. So there was, I won't lie, there was a little bit of friction, but the guys who've stuck around in the Marvel space, some of the warmest, most respected, like relatively new, we're talking 3 years in now, guys in the Marvel groups. Donny, a couple of other guys whose names escape me, which is probably the best because I don't want to get it wrong. So I do find that fascinating, that you do have different like cohorts of people. Always fascinates me when I talk to. There's a podcast, you may not know this, Dan. There's a podcast called the Rebel Base Card Podcast, and it is about Star Wars trading cards, and that's a whole different thing altogether.
I know. I think the reason people get sucked in is like you're saying, like all of a sudden, like Donnie is so ingrained in this community in a very short amount of time, is because I think your fans, before you know this stuff even exists, that you're like, oh, there's a whole community collecting this, and like you get sucked in, and the community is very welcoming. I'd have to say, particularly the Marvel community. I know comics can just be nasty, just fandom. I mean, because it's such a large fandom. Yeah. I've already seen posts in those communities that I very quickly would have been like, fuck this dude. And everybody's treating him with respect. Like, that's not how we do it here. It was like, oh, that's so nice. Yeah. Everybody wants to share it, because I think everybody ultimately is a fan of this. And you want, like, that's part of the fanaticism, is sharing this thing you love with somebody else. So I've really been impressed with how welcoming all of those communities are.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I'm really pleased with that, because I think people were, I mean, you'll know, it must have been wonderful watching this from the sidelines and going, I can't say anything, because I'm sure if you're tuned into it and you had time above, your time at the easel, to look at it, you'd have been like, when's the next artist? Who is it? How can we find out? Because with 2020, people did guess, and the reason they guessed is because Upper Deck printed Dave's signature on the back of the cardstock.
Oh,
The sketch cards.
Oh,
I think there's a lesson learned. And I think Dave himself said that's not my normal kind of style of signature. So it would have to have been someone who's really knows their Magic stuff to kind of suss it out. And of course, people did.
Yeah.
About 6 months before.
Normally, Dave has this like graphic, just Palumbo, and typically my signature is a very graphic thing. You can't do those graphic things when you're signing 3,000 cards. So we kind of did this other. I think probably most people wouldn't have identified mine either, if they would have to do some research if they saw that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. Whereas I do find it fascinating how there are some signatures that are not to dismiss yours, but are works of art in and of themselves. Joe Jusko's is one of them
Mhm.
because there's this unmistakable seeing those 5 letters written in the way
Yeah.
Joe writes it, and Simone Bianchi's is just
He's
like
got a great
some
signature.
other level.
Yeah.
There's lots of
Other
good
level.
ones out there. Simonson is like, I think it's his,
Yes.
that's like an actual dragon, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
supposed
Yeah.
to look like you don't notice. It took me years to figure out that's what he was going for. There's so many good ones out there. Mine, I like my signature, but it interferes with printing quite often. So I usually leave it off a lot of my art. So you'll see on a lot of these cards, my name is maybe hidden somewhere in the painting or just an initial or an Easter egg, but
Hmm.
the majority of them just don't have my logo on them because I didn't want them getting cropped funny or messing up the painting.
I'm
And
with you. I'm
so
with you.
even
That makes
now,
sense.
now I have to sign all these paintings, and I'm always like, oh, I don't want to mess up my painting with my name.
Sign on the back, fine. So I want to know, and you might remember the day and the time, like people remember where they were when Kennedy was shot. None of us are that old, but where were you? What was the scenario when you got the first contact from Upper Deck? How did that happen? Assuming they
I'm
contacted
trying
you.
to think the exact time. I remember it was right before COVID hit, or
And what was the
right.
weather like that day? Come on.
Nice, pretty nice. So I didn't get their message for a couple days, for like a week almost, because they had emailed me through the contact form on my website, which is pretty much just, I mean, it's business. It's like it's not clientele. It's like
Mm,
customers that need replacement orders and things. So I
yeah.
check it like once a week kind of thing, and not every day, when I'm getting ready to fulfill orders. And they had emailed me on there, and I didn't notice it, and I kind of was like checking spam. I think it might have even been in my spam folder, and then I
Oh,
discovered, I was like, ooh, it's a good thing. I checked this. And then I reached back out to them and I was like, email me at this website, this email address instead. Um, but yeah, it was just them reaching out and kind of fishing to see if I was available and interested in the project. Uh, and that was the first thing. And it would take at least 4 months before that actually turned into, okay, let's do this.
right. Okay. So in that 4 months, did you at that point, or did you find out from, because I know that when we interviewed Joe Jusko recently, and he said that he knew who it was at the time we
Yeah.
interviewed him, and this was last September we interviewed him, and he said he'd seen some of the pieces. Now, obviously, it took you a fair while to do them, but in that 4 month period, did you kind of do any research, reach out to people who've
Oh
done it
yeah.
before, just to what kind of feedback did you get?
Particularly Joe and Dave, and wanted to make sure artists, it's a tight knit community. There's not too many professional illustrators, honestly. Like, again, there's different communities. There's,
Mm,
a couple hundred comic guys, there's a couple hundred paperback guys. The illustration community is kind of small, the people who truly do this full time. So we all know each other one way or another, have friends in common through conventions and stuff. And Dave, I've been tight with since I said this on another podcast, since I thought he was 16. He wasn't 16, but he was, I think, maybe a teenager, like 19 or something, like fresh out of high school. I
wow.
met him at a convention or something. So we've been tight for a long time, and Joe and I are friendly. So I called those two guys up because I knew they had experience with Upper Deck, they had experience doing the set, and just asked them, like, very frankly, like, what was your budget? What was your deadline like? Do you regret doing this? What's it like working with Upper Deck? Any advice on how I should approach this if I do it? There's a lot of negotiation that goes into that
Mm,
contract. Just making sure I get a price that means I can feed myself for the 2 years it takes to do this. So I basically just pestered them with all of that, and they just gave me a ton of advice. And Dave was the one that was pretty much, he was like, just do this. He was like, you want to do this. He was like, don't be stupid. It's a dream job for you. And he had said, he was like, I feel like I've been training my whole life for this job, between his personal interests
yeah.
and getting faster at painting. And I thought, that's true. Like, if I asked what 13-year-old Dan wanted to do before he died, it would be this card set. And I was like, that's, at that point, it was just a matter of getting the terms to be more
Yeah.
favorable to me, and then getting them to agree to that. So
Wow. Okay. Because I know that so on Muddy Colors, now on Muddy Colors, you're listed as the founder. So was that something that you yourself set up?
Yeah. So I won't say I'm not doing the heavy lifting. I'm just the person who roped all these other artists into doing this thing. And I just basically herd cats every day. It's
Okay, fair enough.
like artists are horrible about scheduling. But yeah, it was that website is quite old. I was thinking about it today. I mean, it goes back to like MySpace days. We started that blog before Facebook was a thing, before Instagram was a thing, before there were all these other, now there's so many venues for artists to learn and glean information from, and Patreon and all these things to get art information from. But that wasn't the case back then. It was just MySpace and people's personal blogs. And nobody can maintain a blog on a daily basis unless you're James Gurney, like who's a robot that somehow does this. So I roped 10 guys into doing it together. I say guys, they were literally guys. I tried to get women as well, and there just weren't any available. And we thought, well, if we all did this one day, a week, we can maintain this thing. And we've been doing it every single day for like 11 years now. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
And every day it's a free, like, here's how I make my art, here's how I shoot reference, here's how I do my taxes, or something educational for an aspiring artist every day.
And that's what I love, because you're giving back. And I'm just thinking about the fact that where you were in your career, and you were up and running as a professional illustrator by that point, but you were already like, okay, giving back and paying it forward, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's a large tenet in the fantasy, or not to sound like an old curmudgeon, it was much more that mentality when I started off. I owe my career to the generosity of a few really nice people.
Yeah.
My mentor that I mentioned, John Foster, who's somebody that does comics and Magic the Gathering, so you might know. I met him, and he just like welcomed me into his studio, looked at my work, and he was like, I'm writing down a list of art directors that you should call and send your work to. And I thought, why would you give me your client list? Like, doesn't that take away from your job? And I asked him that. He was like, no, he's like, if they want to hire me, they'll hire me. If they want to hire you, they'll hire you. We're not twins. We're not identical. There's enough jobs to go around. And it blew me away so much that he would give me the literal phone numbers of people to call, that he was like, just do the same for somebody else. And so I took that to heart, and I've tried to pay it forward the same way with everybody else. And a couple other people that really did that. So I think like my first job was a job somebody else couldn't take. And so whenever I get a job that I'm not available for, like somebody like Dave, I'll be like, Dave Palumbo's the perfect guy. Call this dude. And I think the illustration community just has a real track record of trying to, raise all boats. So
That's really cool. That's really cool. Because the reason I mentioned Muddy Colors is I remember, I think one of the first pieces I saw about Dave Palumbo's work was a piece on Muddy Colors, looking at the Wolverine piece that he did, which blew my mind, because I was like, okay, here's a website, and it's got different stage pictures of it, and it's like, wow. And then a few weeks back, I went back to it because I think you'd referenced a blog piece that you did on there. Like, this was before you would have gotten this job, looking at the Hildebrand set, the Masterpieces 94 set. And I'm like, okay, so this guy was clearly really into his Marvel card shit.
Yeah.
And then he gets this call from Upper Deck. So it's like,
it was very serendipitous.
The stars aligning.
I've always been a fan of the artist, like I said. So I've always collected the artists more than the cards. I don't chase any like serial number. I don't chase a specific like gem or anything like that. I just like the artists. And the Hildebrands were always like, the reason I own that set is because this is the Hildebrands, and there's some great paintings in there. And things are different now. I think there's a whole generation of young artists. And I mentioned the community has changed a lot, because I think it used to be, if you were a fantasy artist, you were an illustrator. You were doing commercial work because you were doing fantasy art, was fantasy book covers. It was Magic the Gathering. But now with things like Kickstarter and Patreon, you can be an independent fantasy artist. And I think most fantasy artists today are not actually illustrators anymore. They're not doing commercial work necessarily. They're just self-generating their own properties and selling their own books and have a following. So it's this slightly different crowd. And I think a lot of them just weren't exposed to the work, just 20 years before them. So that post was like, it was there to hopefully introduce people to this like awesome art, like hundreds of pieces of awesome art that hopefully people didn't know at the time, or just didn't get enough recognition.
And for people listening too, if you haven't checked out Muddy Colors, I usually go there about once a week. I've never read an article and not learned something. So even from when I got into, the magic art and was a baby art writer 6 years ago, like I've referenced hundreds of those articles because it's an insight that you can only get from the artist writing it. Like that information exists nowhere else. Usually it's written for that in that time. And it's a phenomenal resource. It really is. So definitely after you're done listening to this, go check it out because you'd be well worth your time.
And to clarify for anybody, you might come up with two things. There's a Muddy Colors Patreon, which it's an optional thing that a lot of people subscribe for to help support the blog, but look for the blog. That is totally free. That's the one that every day there's a post on. The Patreon is more for people wanting access to high quality instructional videos. And then we use that to basically pay all the artists that do the blog on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now I will put a link to the blog in the show notes, both on the. So what we do, Dan, you probably don't know this. The audio version, there's always a post that goes on our Facebook page. I call it the tasting notes, because I like to eat, and it has, because that's the thing. Great idea 4 years ago. Let's start an audio podcast about a visual thing. Yeah, that's great. Which is fine. Yeah, we're not the only people to have done that. Throw a rock on your hit podcast, but it does mean that for years it was quite a chore each week to put all the images in order that you mention them on the podcast onto this post that goes on the Facebook page.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and I still do it. But the YouTube version is kind of up there because it actually takes less time to put this onto YouTube than it does to do the show notes sometimes. But anyway, but last week was an exception because as we record last week, or Thursday just gone, there was a preview episode of your set, which you may or may not have had time to enjoy. But at any point you wish to,
it just went up a few days ago.
Go and hear what we said about you there. I promise it's all good. So I wanted to talk. This came about very, very quickly over the past week since I knew that we were going to be talking to you. I thought, okay, I can come up with a whole list of questions that will be really good to ask. And I know that you've had quite a lot of live interaction. Well, quite a lot, I say two, but you would have had quite a lot of questions come through that from collectors. So I thought I'm going to reach out by virtue of the fact that we've been doing this a little while and they at least will answer my calls. I'm going to reach out to all of the Marvel Masterpieces artists that we've connected with and ask them, do you have a question for Dan? As something a little bit different.
I'm almost afraid for them now.
Well, don't be when you hear the first one, because I'm going to do the first one, which is brilliant. I've sent them to Donny as well, so we're going to kind of tag team them. So I like to call this particular game, and it's not a game we'll play often, maybe not even ever again, master to master.
Very clever. I like it.
So I'm going to start with Greg Hildebrand.
Man.
So I messaged Jean. Bless her. I messaged Jean, and the response came back, sorry, Greg can't really think of a question.
Dan who?
Dan who? No. I think they were very much enjoying their long 4th of July weekend. So I'll let them off the hook for that. But the next one, Donny, you've got the list, and I think it should be in the same order. So do you want to tackle this one?
Yep. So this comes from Dave Palumbo, who did Masterpieces 2020, for anybody listening that might not know. And he asks, what was your process for conceptualizing the story in each piece, and which pieces proved unexpectedly challenging?
So one of Dave's advice to me, I was asking, because we have a very similar work process, or used to, and we're very into taking photo reference, hiring models. Dave is just incredible at photography. So I knew he was a great person to ask, like, did you bunch up all your photo reference? Did you do this? Like, did you work in groups and stuff? And he had suggested that he does. I know Dave tackled it, and I think groups of 5, like he would shoot reference for 5 things, draw 5 things. I started by trying to follow his method, taking his advice, and I thought it would work well for me. And it just didn't. I couldn't split. By the time I concepted something and then waited 4 or 5 paintings, by the time I got to that 5th one, I just didn't like the idea anymore. I had grown tired of it just out of, sitting on it for a week. It also seemed too daunting for me to tackle the project as a whole. And the only way I could manage it mentally was to think of just one thing at a time. Just this one sketch, just this one painting, just this one scan, done, next. And I just did that on repeat, and it wasn't efficient, but it was the only way I could handle it mentally. And ones that proved difficult, there were a couple, you only get like one shot at a lot of these characters, so like Captain America was a tough one for me because I knew I was only going to get really one true Captain America card. And it's like, nothing felt good enough. Like, it was like, I like this painting. This is a good painting. This is a good composition, but it didn't seem like this isn't everything I want Captain America to be. So I think I kind of like, I would draw that one a little bit for a day and then put it aside and then draw it again and then put it aside. And I kept coming back to it. Another one that was weirdly hard was Taskmaster for no good reason, except that every piece I was doing was coming out feeling like just a pinup. It's like, okay, this piece is about a cool cape and a skull. And it wasn't about his ability. And I really, really was trying to force myself to like capture something in every piece that was about the essence of the character. And that one just felt very superfluous or superficial. And not that he's like that important of a character, but I think I have more thumbnails of Taskmaster than anybody else for some reason. So I finally stumbled across an idea that was like, that tells his story. You could look at that and you could tell what Taskmaster does. So,
wow. Do you on the Taskmaster that we've seen? I can't remember if there's more than one. Is the one with Black Widow?
That's a battle card. So
that's the battle card.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen the Taskmaster solo yet. So we've obviously got that to look forward to. Listen, I've got a question I'm going to drop in now. So, sorry to break up the masters because I'm certainly not one. Of the pieces yet to come, which is the one you think is going to blow people's minds the most, or you're most excited to see the reaction to? And it might not be one of the big ones. There's
a couple. It's been spoiled on camera a little bit. That kitty, when you see a good scan of it, it's one of my favorites. The other Storm card, I'm stoked to share. The one you guys have seen is the Canvas Gallery Storm, so it's a portrait. So again, I was mentioning I try to encapsulate the essence of the character on their card. The Canvas Galleries were exceptions. Those were meant to be portraits, like a portrait of Captain America, a portrait of Aurora. Her base card, I think, is maybe one of my favorites of the set, and I think it's gonna. I think people are gonna be like, "Shit." I'm hoping they'll like it as much as I do.
My daughter, she's going to be 8 in a few weeks' time. She's been so I don't know if you're aware of this, but for about 4 years, I did this Instagram feed. So because I started the MMC group, I started a spin-off from that on Instagram called @MM_Collectors. So every day I would take a photo of a Masterpieces card, and it would be your daily masterpiece, and it would be a different card every day. I put it on hiatus about a year ago, and I haven't picked it up because we moved a year ago this weekend, and things were in carnage, so there's no way I was going to keep it up. I'm going to start it again soon, and obviously your pieces will be in there as well, so I'll be tagging you regularly. But my daughter would always, on a Saturday when I was looking after her when my wife was working, she would always help me choose them, and she would always choose the female characters.
Oh, good.
Because she's a girl, she wanted female characters, and so now she's kind of a bit older, and Donny's seen this. She's really gravitated towards Spider-Gwen and people like that. But earlier on, she came in here because she's discovered that I've got all these retro video games here, so she likes to play Spyro the Dragon. Keeping it old school. So she sat here, and I'm preparing my notes for this evening, and I'm looking at the pieces, and she saw the storm on my screen.
Oh, nice.
And
Good.
she's like, Daddy, can I have that card? So I'm gonna have to get 2 copies of that one. So
that makes me happy. That's good.
You've got a new fan there, which is good. I mean, she gate crashed just after we finished recording the Just Go interview as well, because she loves his pieces. Anyway,
Spider Gwen briefly. Spider Gwen and Miles are kind of a diptych that I think might be another one that I'm really excited to share. But one of my kind of like barometers for is it a good piece is, does somebody like my mom, and my mom is my thermometer, is would she look at this piece and enjoy it even if she doesn't care anything about comic books or care anything about X-Men? And so I'm hoping somebody can look at Storm or look at Spider-Gwen and that be inspired to find out more about this thing, and that they like this just purely as an art piece.
Yeah.
So that's nice to hear.
No, that is cool. No, it's lovely. I mean, it just draws her in. I think the color palette with Joe's work, especially on the 2016 set, just drew her in, because she was like free form and she started seeing those, and they're quite bright, you know, when you line them up next to maybe Simone's work in 2018, for example. So she was definitely drawn to that one, and I just think she loved there was a pink border around the one that I showed her. I said, I think that's one of the parallels, so maybe it can't. Daddy might not be able to afford that one for you anyway. So the next artist, the Marvel Masterpieces 95 artist, came up trumps. Let me just tell you.
Oh.
So Peter Scanlon said, first of all, Dan Dos Santos' work is amazing, and I can't wait to see the set. So he goes on to say, when I did the card paintings, I can remember one of the most exciting aspects was the attempt to bring more reality to the scenes and characters than was currently available in the comics. These days, with so many of the characters already having been brought fully to life in video games, movies, etc., I wonder if there's an extra pressure to differentiate the artist's own unique visions of some of those same characters.
Totally. Oh, thanks, Peter. That's a great question. Yeah, it was weirdly, I think we have different expectations. I encountered it with Thanos in particular on this one, because Thanos is such, in the comics, such a cartoon character. Like, you can't quite tell. It kind of looks like a scroll. Like, obviously it's an Eternal, but like, you don't know what's going on anatomically with his face. Things that work well in comics don't necessarily translate to realism. Dormammu was another one, like that kind of matchbook, that match head looking face. Like, how do you actually paint that in a real way? I think the movies have done such a good job of translating that now people expect a different level of refinement and legibility in some of these things. And so I tried to do Thanos as if he was a real person, a functioning person that like could move his mouth like accurately, and like what that would look like. And I know he's not released yet. It's a weird looking version of him, but I kind of like it. If he was in a movie that I made, he would look kind of like that, but he's not meant to be exactly the comic book version. And I definitely couldn't do the movie likeness. And for a while, I'd floundered between trying to be really accurate to the comics and then putting my own flair on it, and trying to be original, not repeat what they had done in the movies or not repeat what they had done in the comics. And eventually I just dismissed it. I was like, you know what? I'm just doing my version. I don't care if it's realistic enough. I don't care if it looks too similar to the movie or too similar to something somebody else did. This is the way I want to do it. So I maybe put some undue pressure on myself for that, but there were certainly weird characters that Ultron was another one, right? Like, once you see, even in the comics, Adi Granov's Ultron, which looks amazing.
Yeah.
And I think Adi probably designed the movie Ultron too. Maybe he or Andy Park or both together. Once you see that, and then you go back to your classic Ultron, you're like, oh, this looks like this looks like a 1950s version of a robot.
Yeah.
Trying to find that sweet spot in between was tough.
It's like the Iron Man Mark 1 compared to the like Extremis version of the armor. You know, it's so night and day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Great. Donny, Do you want to bring in the next one?
Yes. All right. So the next one comes from Dave DeVries, and he starts with to make sure that you know your work looks stellar, and he says to enjoy the ride. But his question was, one of the things that always annoyed me when we were working on the set was that the current costumes of the day were not the iconic costumes that we all know and love. And he says, to this day, I cringe at some of the costumes and hairstyles that the characters had in the 90s. Were there any costumes that you were forced to use that you hated?
Yeah, yeah. Firstly, also, I love Dave. And maybe I'm mistaken, but I hope not. I think Dave did the Superman piece of just the chest and bullets bouncing off. It was on the cover of Spectrum Manual once, which I think is fantastic. Like, I love that Dave crosses over from fantasy to comics as well. Yeah, there were a couple, and I know other artists had a harder time with this. I know Dave, there was only like one card where he's like, I'm just not doing this. This looks dated and slightly racist, and like, just push it out. There were certain costumes that maybe felt like misogynistic or overly sexual. But for the most part, I was given a lot of freedom on the set. So I just did me. There were characters that I just kind of like did my version of. So if they were an issue or their hair was an issue, I just kind of changed it. And to be quite honest, like those really bad 90s style stuff, I kind of dig.
It's back in fashion.
Yeah, I specifically, like, my Dazzler is not the disco Dazzler, it's the 90s Dazzler. Like, I specifically sought out some of those things. So no, I'm trying to think if there was anybody in particular that I was just like, oh, I don't want to do that version. But I don't know that there is. I think I just didn't do it.
So here's the question I think people will probably be wanting to, because people are impatient. I always say to people, listen, we've waited 3 years for this set. A few more weeks won't kill you. But I'm sure a lot of people jonesing to know which Wolverine they're going to see.
I think you're going to see, there's multiple versions. Wolverine appears in the set, I think 3 times. So there's his kind of base card. I don't know if it'll actually be a base card, but his character card.
Yeah.
There's at least one battle card, and that one's the Weapon X version of Wolverine. And then there's the canvas gallery. And so I did different versions of Wolverine for each one.
Oh,
I
nice.
took the opportunity. I won't say which versions.
Okay. All right.
And again, like, I will also say some characters have, I kind of did my twist on a lot of characters. So you might see, like, you're going to look at Domino and be like, that's not Domino's outfit. There's like, some characters are kind of a blend of different versions of them. Like, I wanted something that didn't quite exist. And I think for the most part, all my Wolverine costumes are accurate, but it might be like, oh, that might be the wrong number of stripes or something. But there's definitely eras of Wolverine I try to catch. So
Yeah. That's cool.
I know the question you want to ask. Is there a brown suit Wolverine?
To be honest with you, listen. I'm more of a Spidey guy, Spidey universe. So it's not a question I'm going to ask, but I think you've let's just say you've wet the whistle. Just as I think of it, because unless I write it down, and I'm not really capable of using my thumbs this evening because it's been a day. That sounds really weird. I've been doing lots of like manual work, so my hands are really tired. Do you know when do you next release some paintings, or do Upper Deck do at a certain point and then they're out, or is it the set release? When can we next expect?
I don't know what I'm allowed to spoil, so I've been erring on the side of caution and sticking to my NDA and only spoiling the things that they've spoiled on the sell sheet. And I'm just dying to let these loose. I've put a question out to them to ask what I can share. So I don't. I don't. So far, I've just been sharing those things that I can. If they give me the go ahead, I'm waiting to hear back on my emails. A lot of people have been out of office for the holiday and stuff. Once I get the go ahead, I'll share a lot more. So
yeah, that's cool. Previous sets, I think it was about maybe 2-3 weeks before the actual set drop, they'd release maybe another little salvo of anywhere from 6 to 12 pieces. So once the
actual set comes out, whether these cards have been pulled or not, I could just let it all go.
everything's fair game. Listen,
Let it go.
I remember last time because in this day and age, the first time people see them, and I don't know if you've watched many of these, and maybe you will or maybe you won't, but you know the people break the cards online and they film themselves doing it. I mean, have you how many of those have you watched in your time? Have you?
Unboxing videos, a couple. Like I said, I'm more of a fan of the art than the cards, even though I love the cards and I like collecting them. I'm not fanatic about the version. So for me, it's more about like, I'd sooner go to Dave's site and look at his whole gallery than I would look at an unboxing of Dave's cards. But I've certainly watched my share.
Well, I'll wager you'll probably watch quite a few more in the next few months because they will be absolutely everywhere. I remember last time round, because Upper Deck have the license for USA, Canada, but also that covers China, Hong Kong, Australia as well. So those guys were actually the first breaks online. So you're seeing these Japanese breakers, like, you can't understand what they're saying, just getting really excited over pulling tier 4 Wolverines from Dave Palumbo. And it was the most bonkers thing. And a lot of the American folk were up at stupid o'clock watching these things. And of course they couldn't do their breaks until it hit midnight in whatever,
I didn't even think about international. Like, I know it's really hard to get these hobby boxes, and I wonder about the allocation, if it's different overseas, if it's almost easier to buy it overseas and just have it shipped or something, or if it's, as far as I know, it's a box,
I don't know. I know they get them over there. I've never seen. I mean, listen, I don't kind of dig into it as much as a lot of the other collectors do. I've never seen anyone like say they've bought from a distributor in the Far East or Asia. So I have a feeling those guys might not be able to sell the boxes. Maybe they can get them, but they have to kind of break them and then sell, because there are some weird rules.
Like Magic is printed in multiple languages. I'm sure Donnie can tell you that. As far as I know, Marvel Masterpiece is only printed in the English language. So
it's one singular printing.
Yeah, they're probably buying from US suppliers anyways, but
it's crazy. It's crazy to watch. So we are firmly in Marvel Masterpieces 95 territory here. Dimitris Patelis. Mr. Dos Santos, very formal here. Excellent work. The Marvel Masterpieces are a life-changing event for an artist. Congratulations.
No, thank you, Dimitris.
So he has he's not 3 for the price of 1 here. So we'll start with the first one. Which other artists throughout your art journey have influenced you the most, regardless of genre or period?
I think probably Michael Whelan. Michael Whelan is a huge inspiration for me. And again, another early person. I discovered his like Dragon of Pern cover right around in the 90s, the same time I was like discovering Just
that was him. Okay,
like that.
yeah. Right.
And kind of like set this bar for me of what fantasy illustration should be. He was a huge inspiration. Still is.
See, the thing is, for me, I'm very uneducated in who did a lot of those pieces, but I remember being really into those paperbacks that came out in the 70s and 80s.
In the illustration community is like, I think he's our generation's NC Wyeth. He's just so good and has been around. I bet if you still walk through, and again, I know there's these pockets, so a lot of people like that collect Marvel art might not read sci-fi fantasy stuff. If you read sci-fi fantasy and you go look at the bookshelf, I bet that bookshelf is still dominated by Michael Whelan's covers from 30 years ago. It's still half the shelf, which is a testament to how good he is.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to make it my. I'm making it my kind of personal journey to A, read more Muddy Colors, and B, actually dig into some of these artists, because I always really used to love those paperbacks when I was like 7, 8, 9. When Star Trek was on telly on BBC Two, 6 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Also, not to sidetrack, one more person that's highly influential to me is Donato Giancola, who's again same genre as Michael, a painter, just like flounders between fine arts and illustration, but has been such a he's been like a compass in my career. He's just 10 years my elder, paints all the same stuff I like to paint, has a lot of the same influences, and I've fashioned my career after his in many ways, just seeing how he handles a convention, seeing what he's charging, and all these things that I think I owe a debt of gratitude to him as well.
Cool.
Ian's heard me talk about Donato probably every time I've been on, I would guess.
So if any of you guys like Lord of the Rings, Donato's the guy to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Lord of the Rings. Oh, don't even get me started. I'm dying to reread it to my daughter. She's not old enough yet. I've read her The Hobbit,
Yeah. Oh, nice. Perfect.
but I think she's maybe a little bit young for that. But I've still read it to her, but she's got no interest yet in Lord of the Rings. So when she's interested, I'll do it. Anyway, how did you deal with other professional commitments during the creation of the set? Were you, and he's got a follow on here, were you contractually obligated to work only on the set?
No, just there was no other time to do anything else. I knew that going in. I was worried about saying no to my faithful clients for literally 2 years. That if you just keep, every time they call, if you say no, 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 after 2 years, they're going to stop calling. So quite literally, taking this job was a risk of, and I'm not understanding this, ruining my career. It was a gamble. I was kind of ready to start shifting away from book covers a little bit anyways, and I had been wanting to do more comic themed work and more private commissions based on comic stuff. So I'd been kind of trying to gravitate my work to that. So it was a good time for that. But I couldn't do anything else. I did set aside time for like hard, essential clients that I would never say no to. Most of them I gave a heads up and let them know I wasn't going to be able to do it. So like magic and stuff like that, I said, I'm sorry, like for the next 2 years, I'm booked up. But I do Patricia Briggs book covers, who's an urban fantasy author. She does a series called the Mercy Thompson series that I've been doing since day one. I think I'm on cover number 28 for her or something. So
Wow.
I set aside, and I'd gotten so much faster at painting these Marvel things that I could set aside, instead of the normal 2 weeks, I set aside 1 week. And so that was, she and Brandon Sanderson are the only people that I stopped work on Marvel for a couple weeks to do their stuff that I just could not miss, and then went right back to their stuff. So.
Wow. Okay. They're lucky people. And Dimitri's final question. Do you ever work till early in the morning? What time of the day is your most creative?
Oh my God. I hate questions, anything about work-life balance. I am truly the worst person to ask. I am so unhealthy. I live a toxic lifestyle. I worked, no joke, on average, I think my average day was 14 hours at the easel when I was doing this job. Some longer, some I think my longest was like a 17-hour stint. And when I say a 14-hour workday, I'm not talking like hanging out at the water cooler and kind of work. I'm talking like butt in chair, 14 hours.
Yeah.
So I would usually start, my typical day was I would wake up at 10 a.m. and grog around the house, just drinking coffee and checking emails till about noon. And then I would sit at my easel and just paint until the goal was 2 a.m. Cut myself off at 2 a.m. And then I would stop. I would go have a seltzer or something, like a hard seltzer, and try to end my day and wind down. And then I'd inevitably come back to my studio with the cider and be like, oh, that's not very good, and paint 2 more hours until
Wow.
So a usual day was noon to 4 a.m. Crash hard at 4 a.m. I would stumble up to bed because I was so tired, wake up 6 hours later and do it all again. And I don't know that it's my best working hours, but it's just the routine I fell into. So.
Yeah. Did you take rest days between the pieces? Because I think I heard you say that it was like maybe a 3-day process for each one.
So,
something like that.
It was Monday, Tuesday. I would do a piece Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I would take off half of Wednesday, and then there was I needed to teach and do these other things. I teach in the meantime, and then I'd have the next painting would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I would usually end up I had no weekends, but I would take off about 4 hours Wednesday morning to go hit the comic shop and get lunch with a friend. And I needed those 4 hours. I basically had 4 hours off every week for a couple of years.
It just gives you that headspace, doesn't it? Just that little oasis.
Yeah, I need more than that. I really, I pushed myself to a breaking point on this job. No joke.
Okay.
I'm done with that. I'll never do it again.
Wow. So. Okay. Well, before we go on to the next one, because I think Donny's champing at the bit because the next one's a multi one as well. Do you oh, my brain's gone. My brain's gone. Do you remember the date that you started and the date that you finished the last piece?
Let's see. I bet I could tell you.
I'm just curious on that because when we spoke to Simone, I think he was like he did it in 18 months, but I think he finished 5 days before, and then he spent 4 days just going over and just like doing all these little, for pieces he'd not touched in a year. He's like, oh yeah, I'm just going.
Mhm. I really do. When I say the beginning of COVID, I think it was like right when lockdown started in the US.
Wow.
Is like almost exactly the first day. The last day I finished the paintings, I feel like was, oof, it was the beginning of 2022. Like we've been sitting on this for like a
Wow.
year and a half.
Okay.
Granted, there were a couple months I needed to scan everything, and then they sent me sketch cards, so I was still doing stuff for them, but the paintings had been done. I think my goal was to finish at the end of 2021 or something, but no, I can't remember exactly the last day because I feel like it just never ends.
It just blended. It just
I am
blended.
still tweaking paintings,
Oh wow.
I'm done and
Wow.
they're printed, but I can't let it go. So I'm like, I'll do a little on this.
You're gonna be like George Lucas tinkering with things 20 years down the line, Do
But
you
it was almost exactly 2 years beginning to end. So
okay.
beginning of COVID to almost the release of COVID restrictions was all this.
Okay,
So.
good. Did you go on a big ass vacation once you'd finished?
No, my family went on vacation without me, and I was still stuck home working.
Oh wow.
My vacation was just like, I think I did nothing for a couple days. I might have played a video game. I saw some friends, but I'm not a big vacation guy anyways. Like if you get me at a beach after 2 days, I'm so antsy. I just want to be drawing. So, no, I didn't. But we have some things planned. So
Good. All right.
Good.
Donny.
All right. This next one is a 4-pack from Nelson DeCastro.
oh,
Number one, how long does it take to paint each card for you approximately? And I think you
Sorry, I
talked about this a
spoiled
little
that.
bit.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry,
That's
Nelson.
okay.
yep. And that is not how long it takes me. I normally spend 14 days on a typical cover worthy painting. And I realized, like I mentioned, so they were on average 14-hour days. So really, I just crammed 42 hours. I crammed a whole work week into 3 days,
Yeah.
is what I did. So I say it took 3 days, but it's not 3 days work.
Same amount of time, just condensed.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. The second question from him was, what were the characters you were hoping to get to paint in the set?
That I didn't get to paint or did?
That you were hoping to paint. Like, who did you want to paint and who did you get to paint?
There were a lot. I was definitely excited about Storm and stuff like that. Definitely excited about Jubilee, and I got to paint those. Some of my first go-tos that I was really disappointed that I didn't get to do was Nightcrawler and Apocalypse. And they were like, they'd probably be on my top 10 list of like, this would have been the first I was really excited about. And they were both on the banned list for some reason. Not quite sure why. Maybe it's a Fox thing with the X-Men movies. I don't know, but I really wish I got to paint both of those.
Gotcha. And then he asked, what was the hardest one for you to do? And which one turned out to be your favorite is number 4. So
my favorites, let me look at my little sheet here because there's so many I actually forget some of them now. I think still my favorites are maybe Storm is up there. It's hard to say. I have like a top 10. I don't know if I have a favorite. Jubilee is definitely up there. Storm is up there. Dupe is up there.
Dupe.
I know it's going to be like some rare card, and people are going to be like, I am not spending $500.
Seriously, I lulled when I read that, and then I was like, I said this to Donny, you'll hear it on the podcast. I was like, they better make that a tier 4 card.
I can't wait for tier 4 dupe. It's going to be great.
Tier 4 dupe. People dropping hundreds of dollars on a dupe.
And then hard ones. Oh, you know what? Punisher was another favorite. And then I mentioned some of the hard ones where really just those big characters. It's hard to follow up Joe Jusko's Psylocke. It's hard to follow up Dave Palumbo's Black Cat. It is just like there was just pressure on certain characters because the characters. So things like
Mm.
Spidey and Cap were always difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Spidey. I just love the concept of Spidey for this one, at least the piece we've seen, the one with the where he's there and he's got the stuff going on around him. I remember because I held looking at any of the pieces until we recorded our preview one last weekend.
Mhm.
So I deliberately didn't. I mean, I'd seen them, but I'd not spent any time dwelling on them, and I'd not delved into it at all, so that I could capture my first reactions for this. And I remember when I was looking at the Spidey, I was like, "Wow, okay, that's really interesting to me," because it reminded me a little bit of one of Julie Bell's pieces from '96, where he's got the mask kind of coming on.
Oh,
And you
no,
can see, but what I liked about it was it wasn't a picture of him in the air or on a building. It was these are the things that this is the reason he puts on the mask. At least that's what I read into it.
thanks. That's what I wanted out of it. But again, it's this give take. Like, you get one painting of Spidey, and I wanted to kind of capture all of Spidey's world. But then also, I kind of want to just do the jumping off a building. I was fortunate there were a couple other battle cards and stuff like that I did get to play with those other aspects of Spider-Man a little bit, where I really got to show his agility and stuff.
Yeah. The one with Venom, I think we've seen.
I might have we talked about we're going to pull up some scans, so I have that one ready for you as well.
Good. All right, well, we'll pull them up in a minute. We got one more artist.
Yeah. Oh, this is
and
great.
we've just mentioned her, Julie Bell.
Oh.
And I was so pleased when she found time to reply on this one, because I'm sure they've got stuff going on.
I adore Julie.
Who doesn't? She's lovely. She's gorgeous.
Before you get to her question, a little aside. So the first time I ever met Dave Palumbo, I was trying to remember when it was. It was at a convention. I was having lunch with Julie Bell, and she had brought her son along, Dave Palumbo, and that's how I met both of them. For some weird reason, I had, because it was a convention and sometimes I'm buying art, I had my checkbook in my coat pocket. And back when people used checks, for some dumb reason, I've always had in my checkbook a Julie Bell trading card of Julie Bell, like her weightlifting days.
Oh,
and
yeah, right.
Oh, by the way, here's a picture I keep of you in my wallet. Would you like sign this? I never met her. I'm a total grown adult carrying around a picture of Julie Bell in my pocket. I still do. It's still in my checkbook.
That's wonderful.
That's amazing.
That's wonderful. And did she sign it?
I think she did. I think we didn't have a marker that stuck to it, but I think she did sign it for me eventually. Yeah, it's still in there.
Wonderful. Right, get that PSA graded. So during the time I was working on Marvel cards, there were several characters that I felt a personal connection with, either because I'd loved them from earlier years reading the comics, or because of some aspect of their powers, visuals, storyline, etc. Did you have any feelings like this about any particular characters?
Ooh, oh, that's nice. Yeah, I think so. I'm always drawn to like strong female characters. I really love. Jubilee might be the one I think I like latched on to quite a bit. My niece posed for it, so there's that aspect of it. It's like a female character, which I've always been drawn to, and weirdly, like, I think maybe because she was always the kid of the team, that a lot of like, it sounds weird that like a 40-something-year-old male empathizes with like a 13-year-old girl character, but I think it's because she was the kid of the team that I always kind of like had this attachment to her growing up. She was certainly one, and I'm wondering if there's anybody else that I really latched onto. Looking at my list over here, I'd say she was maybe my biggest, and Shatterstar. I don't know, again, because it was a sweet spot for me.
Brilliant.
Like, just growing up, there was one of those characters where I was like, I just like this dude. I just like him, and I feel like he's had a nice resurgence. I think I might have mentioned this on another podcast, but I think he's maybe the first openly gay Marvel character that I can think of. And so I felt like it was a great time to reintroduce him. And I did my 90s version of him and not the modern version.
Cool. Cool.
But yeah, those were both like very personal ones for me. So.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant. So have you got, you mentioned earlier that you've got your scans all there. So I don't know if you've got all of them that you can officially show.
I pulled up 15 for you. 15 that were spoiled. Not all of them. Some of them, like the Miles, I know was kind of spoiled, but I want to wait for Gwen too. So some I'm holding back on
Yeah,
a little bit.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Spoil them nice, but
Do you have the Professor X there?
I do. Yeah. You want me? Let's
Right.
see.
Yeah. Yeah. You should be able to share the screen. So feel free to drive if you can figure out where the button is. This is where we wish we'd rehearsed
Let
it.
me get this organized here.
Should be at the bottom.
All right.
Well,
Let me know. Can you see Spidey's up right now?
We can see Spidey.
Yep.
Well, we can start with this one if you want.
I think Professor X is maybe just number 2 or 3, but yeah, whatever you'd like.
Okay. Well, no, go to Professor X because then it will finish my thought. So now straight away, this is interesting. On the I didn't register the shadows at the bottom on this one until this very moment.
I think the image we had didn't have the full shadows.
No.
Yeah, it was a cropped version.
I remember being drawn to the shadows.
Mess it up too. Yeah. So
okay. That's fantastic. I love that. That completes the piece for me.
Cool. Thanks. So for anybody that can't tell, and I don't know, these are always the tough, like the conceptual motifs are tough because you don't know if you're overdoing it or underdoing it. But if anybody can't tell, it's kind of supposed to be the shadows of the first class walking in. So we have Beast, classic Beast before he's cat-like, Iceman, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Angel here, kind of walking into the gates of the school.
Oh, that's Angel, of course. The wings. Okay.
The wings. Yeah.
No, the Jean Grey I'd sus because of the hair and the Cyclops because he's a tall dude.
Just clearly you can see his visor or glasses a little bit.
Now,
right?
in a rather childlike manner, the reason I really wanted to pull this up is because Dan, that's clearly you.
Yeah. There's only a couple ones I made it in on.
It makes me laugh. There's the piece. In fact, Donny, did you have the red Spectrum 1 of 1 from Wizard?
I did, yes. Yeah, it has
time.
since found a new home. But yeah, that was the one that was Dave. He only painted himself into Wizard as the main character. He was in a couple other ones too.
Very clearly, Dave. Didn't he say he was also Jigsaw? A little bit.
I think, but Jigsaw was a rearranged face, so
they messed it around.
I think it was him, and then he like cut and pasted his face. He was in, I think he was in Pip the Troll in the crowd, and he might have been yelling in Blade, but I'm not. He was in a couple of them,
Pip
like
the
ancillary.
Troll.
Yeah,
Pip the Troll.
One of the guys in Blade for sure.
I'm right.
I mean, technically, I'm everybody. Like I'm posing for the hands and bodies of everybody.
Right.
Actually, the likeness. There's maybe like 2 or 3 cards where you could tell it's me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Dave had the slight benefit of when he was doing a lot of his photo stuff. COVID hadn't hit. Yeah. So he was able to. I'm assuming he was probably able to do that, whereas you would have been maybe a little bit limited on that.
Totally.
Now the reason I laughed when Pip the Troll was mentioned, not least of which because it's a fantastic piece, is in Masterpieces 2020 you had what I now call Dave's deep cuts. Yeah. So on this one, when we were looking through the list of paintings, I won't call it a checklist because you don't know where they're going to fall in the set. There's clearly some Dan's deep cuts in there as well. So we've mentioned Dupe. We've mentioned Shatterstar.
Yeah.
My eyes were drawn to Howard the Duck, which I know hasn't been released yet. But was Howard one that they asked you about, or was one that you?
That was one of their recommendations. So out of I'd say the 135 pieces, I would say they dictated maybe 40 of them.
Okay.
Could be even a little more. They started a list and then just left me on my own until we got to like the battles, and then they were like, "Oh, we need these things," and they started dictating. Howard the Duck, ones they dictated, but I probably would have chosen them anyways. He was on my list from the beginning. So,
Howard the Duck. I mean, come on.
Maybe he was mine. So there was a lot of this like back and forth. Like I had a list I wanted, and then we compared it to their band list, and we kind of did a lot of back and forth.
Gotcha.
I'd say
Um,
Tigra was another one that was all me. I
mm,
don't know that she would have made the cut. I just like her. I thought she'd be visually interesting. Uh, and then pretty much anybody that was a person of color, whether they made the list or not, I was pretty diligent about trying to slip them in there. So
yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
Bishop probably would have made the cut. I don't know that Blade would have. I guess he since he was in Dave's set, maybe he would have. But there were a couple that I was just particular about.
Sorry, I've just seen Squirrel Girl on the list,
Yeah.
and
Modoc, I think Modoc might have been mine.
Modoc, Modoc, Modoc. I asked Donny this last week. I don't think he's seen it yet. The new Ant-Man movie. Have you?
I've still not seen it yet. No.
I
Since,
fell asleep on it twice.
okay, all right. Well,
That
fair
hasn't
enough. Keep me
Modoc in it
busy.
yet, for what it's
Mm.
worth. He
Yeah,
hasn't
you.
made a cameo
Yeah,
yet.
keep
I
me
don't have
busy.
to watch that. It's gonna go to the top of the list.
Yeah, it's fun, but you know, Paul Rudd. I mean, Paul Rudd's just brilliant to watch.
Yeah.
Um, can we go back to purely selfish reasons? Can we go back to Black Cat, please?
Yeah.
Now, is that the way up that it's because she's clearly upside down,
That's
but
the
it's
way.
inverted?
Is it clear she's upside down? I think it was meant to be a little like takes you a moment to figure out she's
Yeah,
upside down. At first,
yeah,
you don't know if she's just jumping through laser beams, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
hopefully you see the guy in the background.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. That's it.
oh, it's supposed to go this way.
Now,
Yes, I just,
the reason I went there with it is because of the hair. Now, I'm a Black Cat collector, and I am rather fussy about the depiction of my girl when it comes to sketch cards. And one of my big things with sketch cards is the hair's got to be right. And good hair on a sketch card could be the only reason, you know, I acquired some of them. And you absolutely nail it here. And I've noticed that across the female characters we've seen is that you just seem to be able to. I mean, I don't know what the what the technique is. You know, I just know that it looks absolutely astonishing. Has that always been something that you've? Because Donny said that your female characters have always been, you know, really strong. Is it something that you just always found?
yeah, I think yeah, my female characters have always been my favorite. Maybe it's also like I grew up in a household with three women,
Okay.
three generations of women. So like my role models have always been female role models. So without getting too Freudian, I'm sure there's something there that I'm attracted to that kind of strong female character. Uh, and then my career, a lot of fantasy, urban fantasy in particular, the kind of covers I do is geared towards a female audience. So think of like
Mm,
Hunger Games kind of thing. So it's just female-led heroines and protagonists in the story. So I just got good at drawing that. I actually think hair was one of my weaknesses. So I spend a lot of time, particularly on Black Cat, like trying to make my weak part the strong part of the piece, which is something I do a lot. If I think I'm
wow.
really bad at something, I try to make it the focus of an image and force
Yeah,
myself to get good at it.
yeah.
And so I think there's a couple characters I did a particularly good job on their hair and stuff. A couple probably not so good, but I like it on this one.
Well, this is why and the reason I asked you to go back to this is I just spotted that Medusa was on the checklist, and I know we can't see her yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing how you've done Medusa.
Her hair is crazy. People might hate it. I I know I probably said this, but every now and then I'll do a piece and I ask myself, is this too weird? Like I'm getting too weird here. And then I just think, you know what? I like it. I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways.
Brilliant.
And hair is one of those things that I sometimes like. I know you can kind of see a little bit that it's been spoiled a few times on video. Kitty, her hair is this weird, like it kind of looks clay, kind of looks fake, kind of looks like hair thing. Just I think hair is this great opportunity to play with design shapes.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I like just going crazy with stuff. So Medusa is one of those where people are going to be like, this is weird, but maybe cool, hopefully cool.
No, I'm really looking forward to it because I distinctly remember, was it Joe's? The hair was just like the whole piece was just like it's the craziness of it. It was so vibrant. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Yeah, I was going to ask something else, but it's gone out of my head. So what else do we have here? We saw the Spidey very quickly.
We'll start at the beginning here. We'll go through and let me Let me actually enlarge all of these for everybody.
Ah, we can see them down the side. Good.
Okay. And you guys can see, you're not seeing my messy desktop on top of that,
No,
right?
no, no, it's very clean.
Good. All right. So we've got Spidey here.
It's great. I can't stop looking at that piece.
Thanks.
The Spidey piece.
You know, I mean, every character to me is more than just the character. It's a whole world.
Yeah.
Same with T'Challa. You know, I feel like you can't capture Black Panther's what he is as a character just by running through the jungle. You know, he's more than that. He's like a king. He's a protector. So I wanted to make sure I showed all of Wakanda in the background too. Like he's watching over the city.
And I love that I've just spotted it now. Again, it's with the images released and what isn't visible. The eyes of the kind of got a gargoyle, I guess, that he's stood on.
Yeah, kind of this cool Art Deco. I wanted like an Art Deco style Panther building. Yeah,
it's brilliant. It kind of almost mirrors in a way.
Yep, that's the hope. Black Cats.
I'm going to spend the next 2 years talking about that piece. So, you know.
Dan, even though that's super, you know, kind of the same idea as Dave's, you probably would have painted this before you even saw his, right? Like that's it would have been done way before that set was released.
I tried to block out anybody else's images of their characters because I just didn't want. I think, again, Dave and I having so many similar influences, we were probably both like laser beams like immediately. And that's where we built the piece around because it's a cat burger thing. Of course, that's the idea, is like breaking into a museum with laser beams around. But yeah, so, and I did the same thing. I noticed it happened a couple other times. His Captain Marvel is basically my Captain Marvel from a different point of view, or I should say mine is his from a different point of view.
Oh, wow.
And then I had never, not too many spoilers, but I did Captain America versus Red Skull. And in retrospect, I discovered Joe Jusko did almost the exact same painting. I just never knew it because it was like a hollow foil card that was too rare for me to have ever collected. So I never saw that piece of his. And I finally saw it, I think in one of the groups, somebody shared it. I was like, oh shit, that is exactly my composition. And it's just, there's a lot of like, there's only so many solutions to a visual problem. You know, when you're trying to get two characters to fit on a card, you end up coming up with a lot of the same answers.
Yeah.
But yes, this is, you could almost think of this as the same scene as Dave's, like just a moment before or after.
I love it.
And that's cool because it kind of reminds me of, in my head, I've got this visual image of a film strip.
Yeah.
It's you know, pieces of a bigger story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a tapestry. I love it.
Again, trying to build out the world that I think you can't really like. Professor X is more than his abilities to me. He's a teacher. He's a captain. He's like, so I wanted that sense of him running the school is like a large part of what makes him him outside of his abilities.
I love the texturing on the brickwork that goes around on this one.
This was another one where there's a couple pieces where I spent longer on the scene than on the character themselves. Oh, these bricks. Just, there's no fast way to paint bricks.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it works. I love it.
Storm, 2 of 2.
Goodness me.
This is another canvas gallery one. I tossed a couple in here for you guys. A little larger. There's another Magneto card as well that I think is a nice image of him. And I think Magneto probably appears 3 times as well in the set.
Oh, that's just it's seeing it in, because obviously the images we've seen, a lot of them are kind of done in the you know, the image that they'll be like in the card. So just seeing them in their full.
Thanks. This one, you're probably seeing this right now on your screen, larger than the original is.
Yeah.
It's only 6 inches wide. It's only about this big. So,
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, there's, you know, you're seeing some roughness and stuff in here, but like, you know, by the time it gets down to card size, it's less rough. And the size I painted it at.
Yeah, exactly. Can I ask actually, while I think about it, sorry, your one of the things that they do in the set is they do the preliminaries as as things that you can get a redemption card for, and then you send it in, and it will be completely pot luck as to which one you get. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to get. And Donny, thank you, Donny, for this one, because Donny spotted it and snapped it up for me. The one that Dave did. So
Awesome.
I've got
So
that
good.
on this
That
little
is
bit of
truly one of my favorite pieces from his whole set, by the way. That black guy.
Um, so I'm very happy with this. I couldn't get the original art, but this very, very happy with. So what can people expect from your kind of versions of this, and what kind of size or format are they?
I think on that sales sheet, you probably saw like a pencil drawing of Squirrel Girl and Craven.
Oh, Craven. Yeah.
And Deathbird on the left. Those are my preliminary pieces that will be given away. And I think I've got a scheduled post on my Patreon tomorrow that's going to spoil a little bit of what to expect. Upper Deck hasn't spoiled too much, and I don't want to say too much about what you can expect redemption wise, but there will be there's more than 100 original works of art of mine that will be given away as redemptions or achievements or something in that set. The majority of them are preliminary pieces, a couple original paintings from the set, some heavy hitting ones too. And lots of sketch cards and sketch covers will all be redemption. So I know we talked a little bit about sticker shock on this set, and I know people are upset that there's no guaranteed sketch card hits and stuff like that. I don't know that there isn't a guarantee. I think they just are waiting for numbers. They don't know, so they didn't say anything. But for what it's worth, if it changes anybody's mind about investing in the set, there are at least 100 pieces of mine alone, in addition to other artists that are going to be redeemed in this set.
Wow.
So
Okay.
to answer your question more specifically, let's see, this is a printout, but let me I can't show this because it's Wolverine.
Almost. We were so close.
So those pieces, my preliminary process, and some people might be seeing this online, like I've been doing how-to posts and stuff. It's very rough thumbnails and then color studies, and then I do reference and I do more digital work. And then it's like just piles of tracing paper and scraps of paper and a head from this drawing and a leg from this drawing. Upper Deck asked me to show the preliminary stuff, which is all, it's back in my studio. It's just piles of scrap paper and tracing paper. And they said, that's fine. I thought it looked ugly. I didn't want to print cards that look, because in addition to these being redemptions, they actually make these cards look like this. I would be fine giving away those messy drawings as redemptions because they're part of the process, but I didn't want the cards to look bad. So I went and normally I take all of those scraps and I just kind of like, rub it on my canvas. It helps me, like I transfer my drawing. It doesn't look print worthy. So I went and I took all of those tracings and traced it over one more time, all unison on a single page. So you're not like, when people win it, they're not getting 4 pieces taped together. They're getting an actual image. And then that's what you're seeing printed as the preliminary art on those cards.
Nice. Okay. Oh, I'm excited about that.
That's my final drawing that then I transfer to my board, and that's what I paint on top of.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is not a concept sketch. Those are so illegible, nobody would know what they're looking at. What you're seeing is the underdrawing phase. Like that is when I'm locked in and I'm like, I am ready to paint, and I'm painting on top of a drawing. It's that drawing that you're seeing.
Wow. Okay. Good. All right. Yeah, I'm excited for those. Let's see. My reaction to this, it took me a while to find it in my head, but it was Die Hard.
Funny, cool. I like Rocket. I got to do all the Guardians on there, which was nice. I was a little worried about this one being so gun heavy that they might not go for it. And this was the first character that I deviated a little from his costume, that I didn't put him in his jacket. They had specified the exact costumes on a lot of characters early on. The ones that they chose the character for, they also told me the costume for. And I took off his jacket because I needed a spot of white in the piece. Otherwise, it all would have been too dark. And I thought, are they going to give me a hard time about this? And they didn't. And once that passed approval, I was like, oh, I'm changing everybody's costumes. Like, I'm just going to do whatever version. If I could take the jacket off of Rocket, I can do whatever. So.
Oh, great. I love the fact
cool.
that some of the bullets are still smoke. Oh, my goodness. Squirrel.
Oh, so I think maybe this one might be an early spoiler. You only have seen the preliminary art for this one, probably, right?
Yes.
Oh, so I thought this might be a nice treat for you guys.
This is
That's
brilliant.
cool.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. It's this the squirrel in the air. Is that Tippy, her kind of pal?
That's the one I'm kind of picturing as Tippy, is the one off her shoulder.
Because you've got there's a lot of squirrel action going on in this one.
And then it's all going to get covered by type and border.
I know, but I mean, listen, Squirrel Girl is one of those Marmite ones. There are people who are very few people who are passionately go after her, and everyone else kind of just throws verbal rocks at them in a nice way. Yeah, not mean. But I love that she's for the people that collect her. I love that she's been given a really, really strong treatment, because I love the light on her tail. That's really cool.
There's a lot of people going to be very excited about that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, she's another character that I think is a fun character that's having a resurgence lately, and well deserved. And I think she hits well with a younger crowd and a female-centric crowd and stuff. So,
but what's good is that since with every Masterpieces set over the last few years, there's always been a character that people never saw before, never appreciated before, that suddenly gets more followers and more collectors. So Ego the Living Planet is one that I would definitely say came out really well from the set that Dave did. And this one, I think there's going to be more Squirrel Girl collectors, frankly, after this. So
there's, again, I think just a single piece of art can do it. So for me, the Unstoppable Squirrel Girl comic is drawn by a woman named Erica Henderson. It's just brilliant, and it's colored by Rico Renzi, I think. And the combination of those two together is just like, it's this perfect Squirrel Girl. She's this like very cartoon-like, plus-size, like kooky girl that was just like made me fall in love with her. So
I love it.
I feel like she's coming back in a big way.
She is. Right. Who's next? Oh, there we go. Ultron.
There he is.
Another one, like trying to find that balance of classical and modern. Really
It's what he's standing in. Is that like molten metal?
Like, just I have no idea, like some foundry melting or something. Again, it was indestructibility without one of the real challenges in this set, and it doesn't seem, is that you can't mess up the characters in any way. You can't distress their outfits. You can't dirty up their face.
Okay.
You can't do a lot of these things. And so like when you're trying to show a battle, that's hard. And when you're trying to show somebody who's essentially invulnerable, it's really difficult to show that. So I thought, if he's walking through lava just fine, that's a great way to kind of show off this idea that he's just unstoppable.
No, that's
cool. I guess he can't be on fire. He can't be like charred or burnt or like missing robot pieces.
Yeah, and the idea, like everything else is destroyed. So we have I-beams, we have Cap Shield.
Cap Shield, I've just spotted it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to drive Pankit. So there's a collector called Pankit who collects Captain America, and he's a character collector like me. So he collects on hard mode. So if any visual aspect of the character appears on the card, he's got to have it. Now he might luck out here; that might get cropped. But if it doesn't get cropped, he will need this card.
Yeah.
So.
There's a little bit of that. There's little bits of Cap in quite a few pieces, actually. So he might have his work cut out for him.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he's gonna be cursing you, right?
Again, like I'm talking about the idea of the character. To me, Ultron, I think it's the idea of vengeance and stuff. Like he really is like part of his character is he's an Avengers enemy. I think like that drives him in many ways. So I wanted to show something in there a little bit that he's a vengeful character.
He's got that rage about him, hasn't he? Cool. Jubilee, there's you go.
That's one of my faves from the set.
I love the colors.
I'm excited about her.
I love the colors on
that. Shout out, because maybe people don't know, but there's an artist from the 80s named Patrick Nagel who passed away quite young, but he's the guy, if you think of what 80s art looks like, that's Pat Nagel art. The like red lips, white faces, and just neon lasers running through. Daft Punk is basically just ripping off Pat Nagel's.
Oh wow, okay.
There's a lot, there's like, I think a whole literal Adult Swim cartoons that are just like made to look like this Miami Vice 80s style of art. That's all Pat Nagel, who to me growing up, I think in retrospect was maybe like one of my first artistic influences. And I just didn't know who he was, but I used to hang out. My aunt was a hairdresser and she had a hair salon, and his work was hanging up in the hair salon because it was just makeup, like pretty girls. And I would sit in her hair salon over summer break and kind of draw some of his stuff. And I'm not realizing who he was, but he's since kind of seeped into my subconscious a lot. So if you guys want to Google Pat Nagel, you'd be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I've got a whole,
Yeah,
I'm
for
going to
sure.
have to write down stuff when I listen, because I listen to the edit pack. I'm going to be coming up with a list of names, and then that's going to be my task to myself to find out more about these guys.
So the treatment of Jubilee's ability is meant to kind of be a shout out to him a little bit, and even the color choices of it a little. So
That's brilliant. I love it. Who's next? Oh, I love this one.
Luke Cage, he was another one. Like, again, I feel like a lot of these characters you can't take out of their environment. I think you can't do a Luke Cage card with it not being about Harlem in some way. So I wanted to literally show him on the street, like protecting. So there's lots of story here, but like obviously this guy just mugged some old lady, took her bag, and he's like knocking out some pump thief in his town. I know the barbershop is not a real thing in the Luke Cage comic so much as it is the TV show, but I feel like barbershops in particular are just such a thing in Black culture, and in Harlem in particular, I associate it with. So I wanted to like bring that essence into there.
Oh,
I've
just spotted an Easter egg.
There's a lot. What Easter egg did you spot?
A Tusker.
Yeah, great, good. So like, yeah, original creator. There's sorry, my mouse is a little sensitive. Buscema is in the graffiti a little bit. My initials. This is supposed to be like Romita, but it's broken up. And then there's a little bit of a K that was gonna start to be Kirby kind of thing.
Oh,
so much to look at.
There is so much to look at in this.
DS slipped in there for my initials. The phone number is a Harlem area code, and 1972 is the year Hero for Hire first came out.
Yeah.
And then again, I thought, like, to me, Luke Cage, it's about him being a role model and a protector of his neighborhood. So I wanted this idea of these kids inside of the barbershop watching in awe of this like guy they want to grow up to be. Because again, I feel like that is part of who Luke Cage is. I wish I got to spend a little more time on some of those background elements, and I probably will. I'll probably go back and tweak it even more still.
Oh, Sweet Christmas. I love it.
And again, he was another one I kind of like tried to find a balance there of like old school Power Man colors, like this yellow black thing in the bracelets, but then mix him with the more modern version of shaved head and goatee. So there's no actual version of Luke Cage that's maybe exactly like this. He's kind of an amalgam of Power Man mixed with Sanford Green's Power Man, mixed with the TV show version, mixed with all these things.
That's great. And like the full reflection just in the glass. You painted the
love
entire
the reflection
city
in the
scene.
glass. Yeah.
Just that's wild.
And it's weirdly, even though I wanted it to be Harlem, the reflection is a little bit more. I think that might be like Times Square. I was thinking of maybe a little bit like this idea of these roads going against that one building seems very Times Square. So, just New York. Or again, another person who is, there's more to him than just him. I feel like the hammer is as important of an element to his ability as he is.
Very much so.
And that you might even argue that Thor himself isn't really a superhero outside of his, like, the hammer is what's kind of giving. Now it's changed a little bit, but initially story-wise, the hammer is what's powerful, not Thor.
Yeah. Right.
So I wanted that to showcase as well. And I took it upon myself to change the pronouns on the hammer a little bit. So.
I could see your signature on that one, or your name rather, just on the column that he sat on.
And then I kind of did in a couple pieces, I did this like very Kirby-esque rainbow bridge where it's like this like zigzag kind of like cutty thing. Like, I don't know why the rainbow would make a 90-degree turn, but I like that old school psychedelic Kirby vibe. And I thought it'd be cool to have it going around buildings, almost like some sky bridge, you know.
Here's a question for you, because I noticed Heimdall, I don't believe, is in the list. But I noticed Jane Foster is in the list. So can we expect the Jane Foster to be in her The Mighty Thor?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
That's cool. That's cool.
So looking forward to
Which is
seeing that.
another reason why I was deliberate about making sure I changed the pronouns on
Yeah.
both, since we have it being shown more than once.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that Jane Foster. Oh.
And you guys, I don't think this one's been spoiled without the weird emerald, like the holofoil, the battle spectra background. So I thought I'd show this one a little.
So this is Venom versus Spidey for those on audio. For those on audio, get to YouTube right now.
Right.
And so this one again was another chance. So there's another Venom card, there's another Spidey card, and I wanted to explore different things about both characters on those cards. So this one was a chance for me to kind of show ultimately like a more agile Spider-Man. And this Venom honestly doesn't look anything like my other Venom. I just wanted to do this like way oversized, beefed up Venom kind of monster guy on this one. So just
that's right.
Like tiny, fast, and agile versus like big, strong.
Yeah.
Battle.
And he's just ripping Spidey's webbing off himself.
Yeah.
It's like
it's the little pieces of symbiote like reaching out towards Spider-Man's hand.
Yeah, I picture like he just got whacked in the face with a bunch of web and Spidey's zipping in and bouncing off him before he can even kind of get the stuff off. You know?
And the saliva just coming off Venom's tongue is such a lovely touch. That's gnarly.
Thanks. I know a couple people have been asking for me to spoil that one lately. So.
Yeah, well, this will. Oh.
And this might be my last one. This is number 15.
Okay.
No, this is kind of the showcase piece of the set.
Yeah.
And again, this idea of the character being larger than their identity, that it's what they signify, the sense of duty to your country, the sense of pride and stuff. So I wanted to really capture that with this piece.
That's astonishing. I love the just the middle little boy's head is just almost perfectly centered at the star on the shield.
It's such a golden age meets 2023. Like I love that. Just all the little bits and pieces, and you talked about Rockwell and Leyendecker, and you just have those just transported 100 years into the future. That's so cool.
Thanks. I was really trying to go for that Rockwell vibe on this one, and again about the idea of this like. Here, I think of all of these Marvel characters, they really are modern mythology. They are Homers. Yeah. They are Achilles. And so I like the idea of like, it's Cage inspiring the next generation. It's Captain America inspiring the next generation. That was important.
Yeah. It's interesting. That's exactly when we spoke to Simone a couple of years ago. That's exactly what he was saying about the modern mythology of the characters. And what he was going for in an exhibition that he was doing in Italy at the time.
I think it's that way for a lot of, if you look at, like Joe Jusko's Captain America, you look at Dave Palumbo's Captain America, they're very political pieces. I think that like maybe some of them got banned. Like Dave's Captain America is this depressing homage to like almost feels like a commentary on war in America, because I think that's what Captain America is for so many people, is he's this symbol of America, that it's not just Steve Rogers we're painting like our feelings about America. I think on Joe's it's a bloody flag coming down and stuff, which they might have changed. But yeah, on this one I wanted to, despite maybe my personal feelings on politics, I wanted to make sure it did a good job of symbolizing all of that.
Yeah. How much do you love painting those scales?
You know what, they're not too bad. I think they'd be worse. Drawing them is a little harder than painting them, getting them to line up just right. And I've done scale mail enough times since I do Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. I kind of made it look more like old-fashioned medieval scale mail armor. I like dragon scale, but I actually kind of quite like it. I
That's
think
cool.
I did it twice, right? So I went
Yeah,
back.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
of course. Yeah. No, it is. It is interesting. I've heard it. I've heard tell from artists who've been like, I absolutely fucking hated it. So it was interesting to see.
There's a
Well,
lot of things like that in costumes where you don't
yeah.
realize until you have to paint it and not draw it that it's like, oof, this doesn't translate quite as well.
Well, the thing that came up when we spoke to Joe, and he said this before, so I brought it up when we spoke to him, was that he's not a fan of drawing Iron Man at all because he doesn't like the armor, and then you get people like Julie, who one of her first Marvel cards was the Iron Man from Marvel Masterpieces '93.
No one better for metal than Bell and Viejo.
Yeah, yeah, and her surfer was just like chef's kisses. Um, these are amazing. We just quickly because we probably need to let you go soon. Can I just ask about sketch cards? Because I don't know if you'd ever done them before
Nope,
this set.
nope. This set is the first one, and
And
there'll be quite a few in there.
and how have you found them?
They were here. I'll pull up one. I'll spoil one as a sample.
Okay,
Ooh.
just so you know, this episode will probably be up. Where are we? Sunday. We've got about 10 days till this episode's up. So
So I'll have already spoiled it on my.
that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. But what I'm saying is we won't. There'll be a little bit of a delay.
All right, screen sharing is paused. Let's see.
One can only imagine, Donny,
Oh,
the
why?
marvels that he's scrolling through right now.
Hiding away, just waiting.
Share, but it doesn't want me. I'm going to stop share and go back to it.
That's okay. Mm. Oh my giddy aunt.
They are hard. Sketch cards are really hard. So kudos to all the guys that do this. But I will say, Upper Deck is very protective of those sketch cards and very stingy. So there is no room, there's no experimenting. Ideally, on a new surface that I don't know, I would like to have a couple tries before I ruin a card. So it took me a while to figure out what mediums work well on it, what mediums don't, how much water I could put on it. But by the end of however many I did, I started getting the hang of it. Same thing with the sketch covers that I did.
What did you end up going with, Dan, for medium? Was it oils or acrylic or a little bit of both?
Mostly airbrush and colored pencil.
Okay.
Is the only thing everything just sucks into the and they keep changing it every year. So like I keep hearing from people that it's like you finally figure out one method and then they change the paper on you. I think marker people have a lot of people do marker on theirs because it's the only thing it seems to take well.
Gotcha.
But if you're airbrushing, you're never really getting much water on the surface. So I would just kind of start with the light drawing, airbrush some tones, which you can see that's why there's a lot of like brown overlap here, and then tweak a little with colored pencil and stuff.
Nice. You're going to be okay, Ian.
Listen, I'm going to collectively speak for our audience when I say, holy fuck. That is astonishing. Hats off to you, sir. So for those who don't know, we're looking at a sketch card of Electra. And that's on a 2.5 by 3.5.
Yeah, so let's zoom out.
It's incredible. That's wild.
All you're seeing is all like
that's
when it's big.
Just wonderful. I'm duty bound to ask if there's a Black Cat sketch card somewhere in that mix.
Let me think. I don't know.
Okay. You and I will speak at some point in the future about that becoming a reality, sir. I'm sure you're getting. I'm sure you're getting
characters for sketch cards. I did not choose characters for sketch covers.
Okay. You must be getting absolutely bombarded with. I mean, I know Fausto is being your kind of.
I haven't checked any. I am so bad. We set up an event. I need to go through and read everything. We're kind of waiting. I am getting a little bombarded on DMs and stuff.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we've tried to keep that pretty organized.
Yeah. It will be. Listen, the volume will go down on it, but it's at the moment. I'm sure it's going to be. There's going to be loads of people asking, "Have you got any APs? Have you got any APs?"
I've got 15 APs for myself that they gave me, and those I'm hoping to. And I don't know how it's usually done. And I want to make sure they get everywhere. So the plan with them is I'm going to ideally, I'm just going to paint whatever I want. one at a time.
Yeah.
And when I'm ready and I like it, I'm going to put it out there and sell it. And I'm hoping to make them even better than what you see here. Like I want to make my APs like full-fledged oil paintings. So I'm going to seal the cards,
Wow.
make them look as good
Man.
as Marvel trading cards.
Oh.
And then I'll be putting them up for a combination of sale and auction. Some will just be first come, first serve. And I'm going to put them in a variety of places. So I'm hoping even like the MCC group on Facebook, one just for there, up for auction or whatever, that those guys get that and it won't be anywhere else. One just on my Instagram, one just on the other Marvel group, one, or probably more than one, on just my Patreon. I suspect about half I'm going to keep for my family.
Of course. Yeah.
And just kind of try to spread them out a little bit and spread them out very slowly. It's going to take like a year for me to, I'm not going to rush into these.
Yeah.
Whenever I have a nice weekend,
Yep.
I'll do the best card I can do.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
And then I think, and this is again, just me talking out of my butt, this might all change. One might be a prize or an auction that it's up for commission, that you're buying the card and it's whatever character you want, I'll do. But
Spicy.
otherwise it's going to be me picking and choosing, because otherwise I know it's just going to be 20 Wolverines or Spider-Man. And so I'm going to like pick some characters. So
Wow. Okay.
They're going to be all 24 cards.
please do that. Just so I can see the collective look on the community's faces when you drop that. That would be wonderful. Are you going to be, you've mentioned that you've done cons. Are you going to be doing any cons that might kind of lean more towards the Marvel side, or San Diego or New York or something like that?
I'm scheduled to do Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia, which is huge. And I think this set is going to drop one day before the con.
Wow.
So
Spicy.
I don't know what's going to happen with it, but tentatively I'm scheduled for a 2-hour lecture there. And I'm hoping to do like a run through of the whole set and spoil it publicly, maybe for the first time there at Dragon Con.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
And maybe have a few originals on display at my booth. My booth is mostly geared towards selling prints of things, of which I can't sell prints of these, but I might put on display like the Captain America and the Spider-Man and stuff like that, just to show off. And then if you can't make Dragon Con, as soon as this set goes public, I think I'm going to do a similar lecture on my Patreon, maybe even make it public, just for everybody's sake, just like talk about the making of the set and really go through every piece one at a time. So
Sure.
But if you guys are in Atlanta and you do Dragon Con, that's the place to see it first, I think. So
Well, I'm absolutely nowhere near it. Absolutely nowhere near it. So I'll be relying on the online version. It did make me laugh. This sort of thing does make me laugh. Let me just find this. So you very kindly posted in the MMC group, and you posted one of your videos, and overnight I woke up to a comment from Joe Jusco that he posted, "Show off." Comment.
He's talking. Joe is a show off too.
And I just thought that was a wonderful joshing, and you know it must be, given what you spoke about and you coming up and seeing that the set's coming out, it is a very elite group of artists. It's a very small group of artists who've been able to work on these sets. That must feel quite, must be a pinch yourself thing. I mean, you've probably had a bit of time to get used to it.
Yes, no, maybe it's because you really do get to meet all your heroes in this industry, and it's always just like awe-inspiring at how humble and approachable all of them are every time. And I think, not to sound jaded or anything, I think I've gotten used to that. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And every time I meet somebody like Claremont or Jusco or Waylon or Boris or Julie, they're just like, yeah, sure, sit down and chat. It was just like, oh man. So that kind of shock of that has maybe worn off a little bit, but it really is like, truly, like if I told 13-year-old Dan that you're going to follow up Jusco and be chatting with him and painting the same set and getting advice from him and like input from him, I probably wouldn't believe it. It really is. It's a treat.
Well, you know, I mean, rather flip. I mean, you got deluged, I'm sure, on social media on the day that it was announced. But I think I posted a GIF or something like that. Yeah, welcome to the party, pal. And literally, I mean, it is an absolute privilege to have your work in this space, to have your work in this set, to have you give so much of your process and time to kind of walk the community through that on all the pieces of content you've done, including this one. So, I'm just going to kind of preempt it on behalf of everyone. I'm sure they've said it before, but thank you for just, stepping up and being part of it.
Truly privileged to be a part of it. And yeah, and I like sharing that stuff. So there'll be, I shared a little bit on that group. If anybody's interested in seeing more, I've been dumping all that on my Patreon. That's like almost, I'm worried I'm going to bore people with how in depth I get on those.
It's not boring.
It's not.
It's great. I've been following along and it's been wonderful. Not boring at all.
But people can wade in as much as they want. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it's you can either just dip your toe in from some nice fluffy content like this, or Justin's show, or one of the content streams, or you can go and really get a handle on it. Or what I like about it is that you've already done some, and I'm sure you'll do more. If you're a particular, so when the Black Cat one goes up, for example, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be like diving fully into that because that I want to know the DNA of that entire thing. It's one of the things that I love about Dave's process is that he did. In fact, I think you did this, Donny, on your blog. Was it the pieces of music?
Yeah, that was my article series. Yeah,
that was yours. Yeah. And the one that Dave chose for Black Cat was All Mine by Portishead.
Oh, cool.
And it's just, and I know that was his process. I don't know if you'd even thought about having a piece of music that goes with each of the images that you did, but it's a short.
Dave is also a musician. He plays drums and stuff, so he probably thinks about music a lot more.
Wow. Okay.
I tend to work. It makes me sound like a lunatic, but I work in dead silence most of the time, all day long.
Oh, okay.
I can't handle words when I'm working, like music with lyrics, just it's a different part of my brain and I have a hard time with it. So no, I just sit here like a lunatic in a silent room.
It's really strange. Joe Jusko's often posting on his feed that he's got films on when he's in his studio. He'll be like, oh.
So depending on my phase, I'll do Star Trek reruns, but they're reruns because I know the episodes and it's just noise, and it helps. Like a next gen episode is like 50 minutes long. I make myself stand up when an episode ends. I don't put autoplay on, and I do my stretches and then hit play.
Good.
That's the only thing I'll
do
while I work.
Good. I was going to ask about that because I was slightly concerned on your behalf for your well-being when you were talking about 17 hours at an easel. I was like, oh dear.
So it's really like I'm like dealing with rehabilitation now for it, and I'm not joking about that.
Oh my God.
Wow.
There's very few people have done this. Simone is very fast. Dave is very fast. He has a style he can do quickly. Everybody else has done it in tandem. The Hildebrandt brothers, Boris and Julie, except Joe and myself.
I'm going to pull us back to full screen. Just one sec. There we go.
And so no, it was the most grueling thing I've ever done. And I've literally had to, I'm still working on it, trying to undo the damage I did to my body from that. But I don't recommend it for anyone.
Oh, mate. Okay. All right. Dan, where can folks find you online? Where would they want to go? We'll put a link to your Patreon in the show notes, but where can folks
Facebook,
go?
I hang out. I am pretty bad at social media. I try to be good about it. Facebook and Instagram are the big social media sites that I'm on. So on Facebook, just Google my name, but I think it's Dan Dos Santos _art for Instagram, and maybe DS as in Dos Santos illustration for Facebook. My website is a great place where you can just Google my name, dandosantos.com, and link to everything. My Patreon, which is Patreon/Dan Dos Santos, is where I'm dumping all my Marvel stuff, behind the scenes stuff anyways. Muddy Colors is a place that I run and poke in on quite often. And then, I'm always in the groups, like your group and stuff like that. I'm always trying to stay connected with all of that, but usually I'm pretty available. Shouldn't be too hard to Google my name and figure it out. So
Good. Well, listen, again, thank you for making time for this. I'm going to let you go because I'm sure you've probably got stuff to do, and you probably shouldn't be sat down for longer than the length of time we've been sat down.
Leg stretches
Given
now.
that you've got stuff to go and do, that sounds pretty frenetic. But Donny, thank you again for sitting in.
Of course, thanks for having me, and thank you to Dan. This has been wonderful.
My pleasure. I wish I had more time for you guys. This is nice.
Hey, no, this is great. This is absolutely great. Listen, I know you're going to do some some of the stuff you described, like working through the pieces and all that sort of stuff. In 6 to 9 months' time, when the dust has kind of settled, come back again and we'll have a little post-match analysis.
Oh, great. That sounds
Yeah?
good. Maybe in a year or two, I'll be giving you the like master question for the next masterpiece artist.
Yeah, I'm going to count on that. And I'm sure. Listen, if Simone or Joe, I think is put to the metal trying to get his last Tarzan piece finished, and I think Simone's just off being a mad genius somewhere. Because
talking about show off, the perspective on that current
oh,
piece Joe is doing, that Conan piece is insane. I think it's the last one of his set.
I think it is. I think it is, and he's been working on those for years now, and it's been a joy to watch. It really has. But yeah, so hopefully, where by the time you come back around, they'll have had a chance to fire over some questions. So we'll have some more questions for you from the other masters. Dan, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your weekend. What would you like to say to all of the wonderful, wonderful collectors and fans listening and watching?
Oh, well, thank you for watching the Marvel Card Podcast, Marvel Card Collectors Podcast. Enjoy collecting, guys.